Commissioners. It's 10:04 and we have a quorum. And before we go through our agenda, what I'd like to do is just read this brief notice about our meeting. This meeting of the Barnstable County Commissioners is being conducted in person and through remote means in accordance with applicable state laws. People wishing to participate may do so either in person or through accessing our meeting via Microsoft Teams. And the instructions on how to access our meeting remotely are found on the meeting agenda item at the Barnstable County website. So you go to the meeting center menu and click on the joining the meeting reference and use the Teams raise hand feature to be acknowledged, and we will acknowledge you and allow you to participate in our meeting. So without any further ado, I'd like you all to join us in a pledge of allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And now we're going to take just a brief moment of silence to reflect on the bravery, the sacrifices of all those who put their lives on the line in service to our country, protecting our freedom, our safety, and our democracy. Thank you. The next item on our agenda is public comment. Do we have anybody here or online on Teams or Zoom? Ian, do you see anybody seeking recognition?
Any raised hands?
Okay, without any public comments, I'm going to move on to the next item on our agenda, the December 17th regular meeting minutes.
Mr. Chair, I move to approve the regular meeting minutes of December 17th, 2025 and January 2nd, 2026, which was a virtual Teams meeting.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? It carries unanimously. The next item on our agenda is a legislative update with senators here. Senator Fernandez, we have received word that they're on their way. So what I'd like to do, if we could, is maybe while we wait for their arrival, move on to general business item 6B, which is a proposed ordinance regarding a budget transfer. And to bring Carol, would you be willing to come up and fill us in on this?
Good morning, Commissioner.
Good morning.
Just for the record, Carol Coppola, I'm the Finance Director and Treasurer here, Barnstable County. We, as you may be aware or may recall, in the past, we have outsourced some of our grant management to CLA, which is Clifford Larson Allen, LLP. It's an accounting firm. We've had great success in the past. We did have a turnover of staff here at the county and would like to propose an ordinance to transfer funds from salary line to outsource services or professional services to continue that process moving forward of outsourcing those grants specifically for Human Services Department.
Okay.
That's great. And I should note that there's a memo in your packet on the proposal. Do any of my fellow commissioners have a question or a comment to make?
Yes, just
Commissioner Bergstrom.
Does this money come anyway out of the actual grants itself?
No, these funds are budgeted in the operating budget or your general fund, in the finance department and specifically in salaries. And then the amounts that would be coming from grant funds are what we call de minimis charges, which is typically for federal grants, typically 15% of the grant, and that comes in as revenue to the general fund. But no, these are budgeted right in the operating budget.
Oh, I know. I understand but basically the one, you would say that the one compensates for the other. I mean, do we get infected where we have an expense here for grant management? but we also get the different funds for that. So does that cover us? Do I, maybe I don't understand this.
So there's a couple of different ways. It's great questions. There's a couple of different ways that revenue can be generated from managing grants. One is an indirect cost rate, which is set by the federal government. The Cape Cod Commission has one set by the federal government, and those are typically in the 40% range of, or more than 40% of the actual grant would come in as indirect cost or to cover the cost of managing the grant and administering the grant. The Barnstable County does not have an indirect cost rate, so what we have at our disposal is what we call a de minimis. So that's far less than what the actual cost is to manage grants.
Exactly.
So we do lose a few bucks on this.
We do.
Okay.
Not everything is.
That's been an issue in the past, that's why I bring it up.
Yeah, I will say that the what we have seen, what we've experienced over the past about 2 years with CLA managing the cooperative extension grants is their efficiency. So I'll just point that out.
Commissioner Lyons, any questions?
No, I do not have any questions.
Okay.
So with that, I move to approve the proposed ordinance 26 to be named fiscal year 2026 budget fund transfer.
Second.
Okay, so I have a motion and a second. Is there any more discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It carries unanimously. Thank you, Carol.
Welcome.
There's another one here. Anyway,
Look at this.
All right.
we're going to be talking about the supplemental budget.
I think we have this on the agenda. I'm gonna.
Oh, no, we're almost.
Yeah. Senator Fernandez is direct. Senator, you want to come up and begin? And we can resume the other stuff afterwards.
Whatever you prefer.
Sure. We took Carol out of order because we knew you folks were on your way.
Yeah, well, I started at the Mary Flynn conference room and I worked my way down. Yeah. I think last time but I'm glad we're honoring Mary Pat Flynn.
Yes,
It's an incredible.
Nice to say her name. And
Yeah, she's fabulous.
Did you get a chance to check out the facility there?
Briefly,
Yeah.
it looked nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, it looked quite nice.
Yeah, we use it for a whole range of purposes,
Mhm.
often to serve, bringing the community together. And feel free to, if you have a need for it, given the fact that you like to bring groups, stakeholders,
Mhm.
others together. We've had meetings with a variety of state agencies, federal agencies. We do our annual Dredge Summit there, where we have literally everybody that works for the federal and state government, it seems, pack into that room. We get people in virtually. The virtual IT operation is first class. Our
Mhm.
team does a great job there. So
It's
it's
great.
a resource that I think has served not just the commissioners
Yeah.
and county officials as well,
Mhm.
but from time to time, it can be incredibly helpful for our legislators.
Yeah, I
or
appreciate
state
that.
officials to utilize it.
Yeah.
Not to mention the spectacular view of Barnstable Harbor that you get from the window.
Yes.
That's right.
Prisoners had a good.
Yes.
Yeah.
They still do. We would call it that.
Exactly.
Good.
So,
Good.
is it possible, Jack, to maybe text?
That's what I've been doing.
Okay.
Trying to figure that out.
That's good staffing right there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we obviously you guys did your homework.
But yeah, I'm happy to,
You want to start?
if you'd like, whatever you'd like.
Okay, well, for the folks at home, we've got Senator Dylan Fernandez, the anchor to our Cape Legislative Delegation. We're excited that you're here and welcome.
Yeah, well, pleasure to be with you. And it's good to be with the county commissioners. I mean, you guys do really important work across the Cape that's deeply appreciated. I'm almost exactly 1 year in to my first term as state senator for a portion of the Cape, Falmouth, Mashpee, Bourne, and Sandwich. And then I have 4 towns in Plymouth County as well, Plymouth, Plimpton, Kingston, and Pembroke. But as you guys know,
lifelong Cape Codder, and certainly want to do what's best for this region as you do as well. So I think we'll give a little update, and I know you guys had agenda items too you wanted to discuss, which we're happy to dive into as well. But just as a general update, it's been a year in. We've taken on some really big initiatives, none bigger than the biggest infrastructure project that our region has ever seen in terms of the replacement of the Cape bridges. This is our lifeline. If they don't get built, the bridge is shut down for a year and then go to one-lane traffic for 2 years after that, essentially crippling our entire region. So I don't think there's a more important issue facing Cape and Islanders than making sure that our bridges are replaced on time and on budget. It's crucial, and so we kickstarted this first ever forum series for members of the community to be a part of this project, where we bring down the head of the project, Louisa Paywansky, who's running it. We've had 4 forums so far across the district. Hundreds of your constituents, our constituents, have showed up to these forums to make their voices heard in the project. And it's really important that it's moving forward. And it is. And on the state side, we have everything going forward. The environmental impact statement was put out on time. And then we have the money secured for the Sagamore. But, we have room for funding for the Bourne, which has no money. And I'm so glad to be joined by my colleague, Senator Sear. We're just giving a quick bridge update.
That's all you, babe.
Yeah, thanks.
Apologies for I have I'm turning 40 next week, and I'm ringing it in with plantar fasciitis. So apologize for hobbling in here, and don't look at the crock on my feet. But
You don't. Wow.
So Dylan's gotten us started.
right.
We're just going a little bit about the bridges, and then
Right.
turn it over.
I think with respect to the bridges, I think it's been terrific that this administration has taken this project on.
Mm-hmm.
And the Healy administration has provided the leadership in it.
Yeah.
We would not be anywhere close to where we are, but for Governor Healy. And I've seen that firsthand. I've done a lot of these meetings. And at the canal, we have the Bridge Advisory Committee. So I really want to applaud not just your advocacy, but also the incredibly hard work of the governor's office in moving these projects along.
Yeah. And as you remember, Commissioner, I mean, the Baker administration applied several times for these funds, but they didn't put enough state match to even be eligible for the funding. And so we missed out on several years of funding that could have jump-started these projects way sooner. And so that's my biggest concern going forward, is that, okay, we have the money for the Sagamore, we don't have any federal funds for the Bourne. I think it made a lot of sense, the governor's approach in applying for one bridge at a time. One, because the bridges have 2 different dates in terms of needing funds more quickly, and the Sagamore because of the traffic through it and because of its wear and tear, needs the funds more quickly. So that approach makes sense. But now we really need to pivot and focus on the Bourne, which is something I know that they're really focused on, and we're going to continue to kind of push for more state funding if necessary, and support the administration any way we can on federal funding, and of course our federal colleagues as well that care about this issue. So that's some news on the bridge front, which will, I think, continue to be the biggest issue impacting our entire region. From a early legislative standpoint, one of the things that first came up this time last year was the state was trying to close our only mental health facility, state-run mental health facility in this region. As you guys know, mental health is such an important issue for the people living across the Cape and Islands. We have, unfortunately, Barnstable County has some of, I think, the actually highest suicide rates per capita for a county in the state. We have a really geographically isolated community. And so there's a number of factors that come in and just cause a lot of mental health needs. And so it's really important for me, the senator, the entire delegation, that we keep these facilities, this Picasset mental health facility, open. And the governor came in to support keeping it open, and then ultimately in the Senate we passed a $4.8 million earmark to make sure that we have the funding to keep it open. So that's really good news, of course, for the 100+ workers on the Cape who work in this field, but also the thousands of people and family members of people who need the facility. It's really crucial.
Thank you both for your steadfast advocacy on that, and congratulations on pulling that off.
Yeah. Well, it's tough. It was a big haul, but we were able to get that through, along with the, it's not in our it's not on the Cape, but along with the Pappas Children's Hospital, which serves a lot of children on the Cape too. We were able to secure an amendment there around actually, close to $30 million for that, to keep that open as well, servicing kids in need with some in some cases, some pretty severe health issues. A lot of kids from our region go there. So that's really important piece as well. On the, one issue that's our focus, but also deals quite heavily with my other half of the district and Plymouth County, is around Holtec and dumping into Cape Cod Bay. I know you guys have been leaders on this as well, but we worked with Andrew Gottlieb, Association to Preserve Cape Cod, Senator Sear, the Cape delegation, and I was one of 23 petitioners that blocked, alongside the APCC, the decision, the appeal through the DEP, so that we have for certain now that Holtec's not going to be dumping into the bay. Number of issues related to that. We have a big shellfishing industry here, right? We have a big tourism industry where people want to come to Cape beaches for our pristine water. So there's a number of angles here as to why this is important, but that for now has been put to bed, and has been a good win for the tourism industry, the shellfishing industry, and environmental health in our region. So that's a positive as well. We're working on a number of different initiatives that are relevant to this region. One thing that our office has been pushing with the support of Senator Sear is getting a train down to Buzzards Bay. We want to make this happen. Cape and Islanders do not have a lot of transportation options. Mainly it's just the car here, right? And we have a lot of traffic. And for the first time, finally, after a half century, South Coast Rail has opened up for commuter rail to Fall River and New Bedford and Taunton. And we pushed for them to do the Middleborough route, right, because Middleborough to Buzzards Bay is a short stint. And the track there it's not like the track on the Cape side. The track Buzzards Bay to Middleborough is already upgraded and ready for commuter rail access, for commuter rail speeds. The track on this side is like you're going really slow. That's and then there's the whole train bridge issue, which for a lot of reasons it makes sense to do a train just from Middleborough to Buzzards Bay. And so we're really pushing for that. We think this would be a really important piece for opening up transportation options for our region, economic development, taking cars off the road. I mean, there's so many good things that can come from this. We have legislation around it. It got reported favorably out of committee, which is a nice step in the right direction. But this is something that we're going to be pushing the MBTA to do. Bourne has actually been an MBTA community. They've been paying into it because of this access, and so now it's beyond time for them to get the service they need, and it'll benefit, I think, our entire region. So that's something we're going to continue to be really vocal on and pushing for. There's a number of things we've taken up in the legislature this year, which we can chat about. But I think for the purpose of this conversation, like looking forward, there's a couple pieces. I think we're going to do a big housing bill. I'll leave it to the housing chair to talk about that. But we're also going to be taking up an environmental bond bill, which is really important for our, yeah. So that was actually filed in the Senate, which is interesting. Environmental bond bills usually start in the House, but we're taking the first crack at it, which is great. This is really important for our region for so many issues. A lot of funding in there for restoration of different, of whole different parts of wildlife, but thinking for our region in terms of estuary restoration, river restoration, the things that are really important, not just to help the environment, but also mitigate against rising seas and flooding. So those nature-based solutions are, I think, the most important thing we can invest in when it comes to coastal resilience. And we've seen some real effectiveness in that, pulling out old dams, restoring rivers, making sure that when the seas rise and when storms come in, that they're flowing through natural waterways that we can restore and not into people's basements.
Can we hold on? I'd like to.
Yeah, we can dive into that, sure.
To dive into the environmental bond bill. And I'd like to just kick it off, first of all, by saying the both of you have been incredibly helpful in terms of making sure that this bond bill does impact positively Cape Cod. So kudos to the both of you. Really thank you for making sure that there's significant resources there to help Cape Cod. But for your leadership, we would not have seen it. So let's just get that on the table. We very much appreciate your advocacy and the hard work on it. One of the things that I've been working on is trying to figure out a way to extract some of the commitments that the administration has already made to improve culverts. And we're learning that the state culvert repair, culvert improvement program, usually involving local or state roads, doesn't adequately address some of the needs here on Cape Cod. So Representative Luddy is trying to pull together a meeting with some of the people that work for me over at the Conservation District to brief staff on what projects there are federal funds available to help underwrite and the problems in terms of getting state funding. So we're beginning to have a dialogue so that hopefully there might be a way to fix that problem. Because at the Mass Municipal Association convention, we were thrilled to hear the governor praise, and she singled out of all the initiatives, the culvert improvements, the importance of restoring fishways, streams, and so forth. But unfortunately, the state's program does not really help Cape Cod much. Most of those dollars are going to go someplace else. And if we make some tweaks in the program, there may be a way to at least have some of those dollars help us with some of our, fishway projects and ecological restoration projects. Yeah. So there's more to come on that. And Representative Luddy is sort of has been literally in our office getting briefed and helping us sort of figure out a way forward. And she talked about putting together a meeting with others in the delegation and spending more time with you folks on it. And I promised to help her. So I just wanted to flag that for you.
Yeah, that'd be really helpful. And I think, any language tweaks there, now's the time to work on those, because I think this is going to come up probably in the next couple of months here. So anything we can get sooner that we can share with, our members and the committee chairs that are steeped in this, I think that'd be really helpful. So sooner rather than later on that. I'd also say, for the first time, we, first cities and towns to deal with kind of culvert adjacent issues, like we doubled the chapter 90 funding this year, which was, a really big deal for a lot of our municipalities, getting double their roads and bridges funding. And then for the first time ever, and I co-chaired the Rural Caucus for a number of years. And this was an initiative that one of our colleagues, Senator Comerford, was really pushing for, who represents out, a bunch of towns out in Western Mass, was to count road miles into the formula. And so that's a really big deal for our more rural communities, like here on the Cape, so that it's not just, it takes into account, not all this money is just flowing to cities, right? And it takes into account the the cost associated with road miles in some of our larger towns. And we have some huge, I mean, I represent the town of Plymouth, which is geographically larger than the size of Boston.
Right.
But then, of course, you think of Barnstable, the town we're in, Falmouth, Sandwich, these really large towns here on the Cape as well that benefit a lot from this formula, are more rural communities. This is a big deal, and I believe they can use this municipal money, this doubling of the municipal money for these culvert issues. So that's just another way, I think, to get at this. But we'd love to work with you and Rep. Luddy on a language fix on the bond bill as well for that.
That would be great. That would be great.
Yeah.
Sure. It's good to be with you. It's great to be here with Dylan. Dylan and I have worked, Senator Fernandez now, and I have worked together. Now this is our 10th year. We represented the islands. Isn't that wild? I can't believe it.
That's crazy.
Not the new kids anymore. Still young, but not the new kids. But really to get to have Dylan now in the Senate and partnering and leading for Cape Cod, you're hearing from Cape Cod and the islands, where when we speak with a unified voice, our colleagues listen. We have had a track record of delivering for Cape Codders and Islanders. Really, I think that is truly something we're both very proud of. And I just, am grateful for his partnership and really, I think in the collaborative approach that I was taught in this work, right? Thanks to people like Sarah Peak and others who we've served with. This Cape and Islands Legislative Delegation not only works in a bipartisan manner, but we work between, probably more consequentially for Massachusetts, in an across chambers, right, between Senate and House. That is not true universally of legislative delegations. So I'm really grateful to Dylan for his leadership and his friendship, and I think we're really showing our colleagues the real significant needs that Cape Codders face, right? That this is not just a place where, yes, in July and August, we're very busy. We got a lot of people here. There's certainly a lot of wealth, but the reality of what Cape Codders are struggling with each and every day to be able to afford a life here, I think in part is what inspired us to run in the first place. And we're working on this pretty hard. There are a few county specific issues I think you folks want to get into. Let me give sort of an overview of that, and then I can talk about sort of these broader statewide topics. We know that the trial court leases with the county. Right. The trial court occupies about 55% of the county real estate. It's about 108,000 square feet. And there's a lot of deferred maintenance. In the first district court, there's deferred maintenance of $11.1 million. And in the second district court building, there's deferred maintenance of $12.4 million. And this is a legacy lease, and it's at below market rate. This really is something I think we would have to engage with the Division of Capital Asset Management and Maintenance to, figure out what is possible. The Commonwealth has, unfortunately, a number of sort of facilities, but I would just say you have our commitment to have a conversation with them and try to figure this out.
I think we have a briefing on all of this stuff. Is that in the?
We do, yep. There are two,
I think
a folder for each of
you
those.
sent that ahead of time. Did you?
Saturday.
Yeah.
Okay.
You could tell.
Yeah.
But I think that, likewise, right, there's larger capital projects as well. I think we just need to have a conversation with DCAM. I'm curious, in the last time you folks sort of talked to them, this is just sort of a broader conversation we're gonna need to have. There's been a lot of concern about, and actually real appreciation for, first and foremost, the dredging program the county runs. My team was out in Truro last week with Rep. Luddy, seeing their efforts there. There's been some concern that.
By the way, you're both welcome to come out on the dredge.
I know.
The weather
permits. We'll do it. There's been some concern about not seeing the dredge program included in the capital investment plan. My hunch on this is I think the governor and the Healy Driscoll administration are retooling. They just retooled the Seaport Economic Development Council. They're retooling a number of these programs. So we're trying to figure out where this is, but I'd be very surprised to see the Commonwealth walk away from what's an authorization and a requirement actually under bonding authority to have these programs. Of course, what the state provides sort of, isn't enough. But certainly I think here in Barnstable County, because of the county dredge program, this really exemplifies how, we can have scale and we can bring a resource to towns that otherwise, especially a town like Truro or Wellfleet, right, just wouldn't
Well, when I was a town manager in Provincetown, it was the state and the feds that funded most of our dredging projects.
Yeah.
On the Cape Islands. They stepped in. Army Corps of Engineers was incredibly active. They would be in Chatham. It seemed like year round.
Yeah.
Whether in Stage or in Liddy's Cove. And we really relied on them. But as the feds in the state have pulled back, the good thing is at least the state provided the county with some money to at least get a dredge program, and has been incredibly helpful through grants. And again, with your support, has been able to provide us with some funding to get these projects going. Well, I think we're hearing from harbor masters literally all across the region, freaking out literally over the loss of the dredging program. Big budget. So that's great that you're on.
Yeah, I think that this is a reshuffling that's going on. I'd be very surprised if the state would sort of walk away from this program that's also authorized. There's a lot of other places that need help with dredging beyond Cape Cod and the islands. There's 78 coastal communities. Dylan touched on the Mass Ready Act. So this is the environmental bond bill. A lot of this includes pretty significant, good $2.9 billion authorization for climate resilience. In particular, we've really worked on flood control and coastal resilience projects. There's $600 million in this bill for that. And a lot of that is directly in response to what we're seeing here on the Cape, Massachusetts. One issue I've really worked on is flood insurance. We don't have a flood insurance market here in Massachusetts. And so we have been seeing, right, that homeowners are experiencing escalating rates of homeowners insurance. It's harder and harder to get the flood component of that. I actually have two bills on this issue we're hoping to address through this. And then a whole list of other things here that are really important to us. $385 million to the Clean Water Trust. The last time we did an authorization, there was actually, if you read the language closely, there was an enumeration for nitrogen-sensitive areas. Nitrogen-sensitive areas, of course, is code for Cape Cod communities. We're really proud of the dollars we've been able to deliver, on this. Lots of other good stuff in here. There's $120 million for PFAS remediation. I'm the lead filer on the Senate side of omnibus legislation for remediating PFAS that we're hoping to get done this session. So there's lots of good stuff in this environmental bond bill. Maybe what we can do is just send a summary to you folks. And if there's any sort of specifics there, I think my priorities here, well, we have a number of priorities in this bill that we're trying to get done, including an ocean acidification policy that actually we worked on, 5-6 years ago? PFAS, ensuring that we have additional, continued resources for nitrogen sensitive areas and wastewater management, and then this coastal resilience and flooding components of it. What we are very, we are sort of very proud of, and I think is a policy that's working really well, is the Cape Cod and Islands Water Protection Fund. This is something that Dylan and I got passed in our first term. To date, this has saved over $306 million to Cape Cod property taxpayers in the form of 25% subsidies to most of the towns in the Cape. In places as big as Barnstable and as small as Wellfleet are getting dollars. Really, I think this is what has been the difference, right? And why we've finally seen towns moving forward. There's big challenges here, and of course, I think the federal uncertainty is federal uncertainty, and then the fact that you're seeing more and more municipalities across Massachusetts deal with clean water issues. There's more competition for some of these dollars, at least from the state perspective. But at least locally, the Cape Islands Water Protection Fund has been working better than we even thought. It's enabled already $1 billion in projects. We think by the end of this decade, it'll enable over another $1 billion in projects. So this is a sort of big deal.
While we're on this,
Yep.
Just as an FYI, in the Congress, we've been very worried about cuts to the SRF. Last week,
Right.
House and Senate appropriators came up with a compromise to almost level fund the program and spare us from some devastating cuts in the SRF. I know that had many people, including myself, freaking out.
Yeah, freaking out. Yeah.
Here on Cape Cod, but we seem to have weathered that storm. So we just need to keep our fingers crossed.
Yeah.
And hopefully those bills can pass the finish line. This is helpful for us because I know folks in your neck of the woods up at the State House have been very nervous about all of this.
Yeah, no, very, very nervous. And also, if we lose these dollars at the state level, that's going to really just further the competition here.
Yeah.
So, we continue to work on this issue and stay on this, and the environmental bond bill is sort of the mechanism here. I think a few other things we're working on, and then
while we're on
Yep.
clean water, Senator, on our list, on the memo that Michael has prepared for the both of you, there's a reference to the Aqua Fund. We have an ask.
Yes.
On the list. We have an ask before, because as you know, hookups, as we expand wastewater infrastructure in the Cape, we need more hookups, and homeowners, particularly low to moderate income homeowners, need help. And the Aqua Fund is not a lifesaver for people. So we're looking for them to provide more resources. So your advocacy and help on that would be very much appreciated.
That would be great. And actually, I should say it's getting to be tax season, for homeowners who live in nitrogen sensitive areas. In tax reform that we did last session, $1 billion, middle income tax reform package that we passed, included in there was a tripling of the Title V septic tax credit. But more relevant to us, if you live in a nitrogen sensitive area, that tax credit can apply to a sewer hookup. So if you have had a sewer hookup recently, or that a sewer hookup that is coming, which I know is the case in Yarmouth, hopefully with the case in the Wellfleet, we know it's the case in Barnstable and Dennis. Please, take advantage. Look to that, look to that tax credit. It's a credit. It's not a refund. Representative Vieira is trying to work on this idea of getting a refund. I don't know how we'll be able to do that. That's costly. We got to find a way to pay for that. But I want to make sure folks are really aware of this. This is a substantial need. It's up to $18,000 of a tax credit. That should be covering most of the cost of those sewer hookups. It also covers IA systems as well. So again, using this nitrogen sensitive designation as a threshold for us to bring resources.
Coming in handy, I guess.
Yep. Other things we're working on, we've asked DEP, I've actually been corresponding with DEP recently about doing a water analysis. We've seen some questions about water projections, particularly for the towns that don't have public drinking water supplies. This is mostly the Outer Cape towns. Right. Eastham has a small system, Wellfleet has a small system, Truro has a system that relies on Provincetown. Truro and Provincetown are often fighting over water, but we've asked for an analysis of this from DEP and working with the Cape Cod Commission, just to sort of understand, I think when you have the towns that are served by larger water departments have sort of that resources and those modeling. We're asking DEP for this information and they're providing that to us, so we'll share that when we have it. Other county related work that's critical, just want to really raise up and thank the county for their ongoing support of Children's Cove. One of the first things I worked on when I came into this job, I was stunned that Children's Cove is the child advocacy center here for Cape Cod and the islands. This is the entity that is providing support to children after abuse, sexual abuse. You folks are all familiar with this. For those listening online,
it's a hard truth.
Yeah,
it's a hard truth.
One of the things we had been funding this through an earmark in the state budget.
Job in helping us on this program and others. Once again,
it's and it was like, wait a minute, this shouldn't be up to like the whims of any lawmaker here. This is some of the most essential things that we do. So I worked, actually, Mike Roderick's, the Chair of Ways and Means, had sort of a similar earmark funding for the Bristol County CAC. We've actually now baked this into the budget. There's no more earmark funding of this. This is a direct line item providing support, right? This is a core essential thing we should be doing. But a real thank you to the county for supporting this program. That there's not a uniform model of CACs. This is a county program. Some are run with DAs, some are run through hospitals in different counties. It's a bit of a smorgasbord here, but really sort of critical work and been a critical priority of mine to make sure that we're supporting. There's a few other kind of ideas that are in the mix we're looking at. The environmental bond bill will be a big opportunity. The other critical and really the biggest challenge now that we face here as a region is housing. Our housing crisis here on Cape Cod, this has existed since I was in high school and you were in middle school. But really the pandemic has put this problem on steroids. Median home price in Barnstable County is nearly $700,000. To afford that house, a house will let's make $230,000. And this is across the whole county, right? So if you come to our neck of the woods in Truro, you got to make $400,000 or more to be able to afford a home. The reality is that our communities are going to have to figure out, and are figuring out, to the credit of some of them, how do you subsidize housing, not just for people of low income, which we've traditionally done through affordable housing programs, but how do you do that across, really across your workforce, across most of the people. If you don't yet own a home or going to inherit a home on Cape Cod, you're not going to be able to afford to do that. And that's certainly true on Nantucket, where median home price is over $3 million. That's true on Martha's Vineyard. That's increasingly true on the Outer Cape. So what we've done actually in the last session, we established a seasonal communities designation. This is a real whole policy toolkit for towns to implement policies that have worked elsewhere, right? We've looked to the Colorado ski towns. We've looked to places, like the Hamptons have a program like this as well. They have a year-round deed restriction program that purchases both existing units and new build, and they fund that through a transfer fee on high-end real estate transactions. Some of you were around for the transfer fee fights of yore, where we were able to secure this to fund land conservation on Nantucket and Martha's Vineyard. But really, I think this has been the approach. I think 13 or 14 of the towns in my district have sent a home rule petition of some kind to the legislature asking for this tool. And we know that there's been some real discussions here in the county about, how this could be done, in a more sort of collaborative regional manner. I do worry about the ability for each of our towns, if we're able to actually get this revenue source for housing, the actual ability for a town to play in the real estate market is difficult, right? Executing year-round deed restrictions, being able to purchase, in a timely manner, dealing with public procurement law in particular is quite sort of thorny. So we're really sort of trying to figure this out. So I know there's been active conversations, Barnstable County about this as well, but I think we're going to have to really iron this out, legislatively, if we get traction on even getting a transfer fee. But thinking about how this is, how the mechanics of this are administered, I think are really important, because I can particularly see places like, the Truro and the Wellfleets of the world, but actually most of our towns, really trying to figure out how do you realize this?
Right.
How do you play in the real estate market? And so that's what we're trying to figure out creatively.
Yeah.
And I don't have a sort of a solution here, but I'm wanting to kind of be honest and candid of being like, hey, if we had this tool, how are you going to sort of administer it?
I think we can help.
Yeah.
I think we can help like we
Right.
have on the Cape and Islands.
Well, I mean, and I think we have a model, right, where, sometimes when we team up, you can ensure resources are equitably going to towns, right? Because I think that'd be a big concern. But then also, how do you have some efficiencies and some cost savings as well? So,
Commissioner Long.
No, I just, in dealing with this, I've been really sort of more aware of the housing trusts. And I think that locally, housing trusts are a good investment to put money there, because they can be much more strategic, especially on the Outer Cape. The large developments are not palatable. Okay, and the more people are seeing them, the more they're like, this isn't what, we know we need housing, but this isn't what we want. I mean, these are big projects. If you're doing a development, Lawrence Road is a good size, but some of the ones that are going on. And if you really put money in the housing trust, they can focus on parcels that are available, but purchase those parcels so they own the land, and maybe allow some, if somebody wants to build on that, do a deed restriction on it. There's different ways that are much more targeted and fulfills the need for the local people who want it, the children who want to stay, the fishermen who are here and they're having families now and need something bigger. This is, to me, it just seems, I would look at those housing trusts. There's a way that it's much more local and targeted, and you can meet different goals that way, especially on the Outer Cape. You don't have a lot of room. We're 2.5 miles wide. We have water shortages, as you say. It has to be. I just think that they're a good way to go.
yeah, I don't know if you understand respectfully what we've done, right?
Yeah.
Seasonal Communities actually takes and
I do.
establishes a year-round housing trust. This has been really pioneered by Nantucket and Provincetown,
Right,
who's really
I
been
know.
sort of the leader here.
I've seen-
I'm hearing from Outer Cape residents, right? And I live in the Outer Cape. I live in Provincetown. What I'm excited about is, for Truro, for Wellfleet, for Eastham, we have parcels that are large enough that if they're developed to the 168 units the Truro town meeting voters approved, to the, I think, 200 or 300 that we're looking at for Maurice's and Wellfleet, to the Tea Time property, our communities on the Outer Cape can really go a long way to solving this problem. And I think people really like, I think there's this affinity for some of this smaller scale work, but the reality is the cost per unit is astronomical,
I
right?
understand.
This cost per unit is just so
I
difficult. So
know.
we have to figure out
I know at the
some of
Lawrence
these,
Road.
some of the scale pieces, right?
Right.
And then what I'm really keen on is figuring out, all right, how do we bring to bear grants from like the MassWorks program for water infrastructure? How can we use creatively Cape An's water protection funding, perhaps, right? Truro is going to need to actually sewer on Beach Point at some point, but Truro is probably not going to have a large scale sewer. How do you use some of those resources to, have the wastewater treatment we're going to need at Cloverleaf? And I'm actually really excited about what's possible. You look at the smallest towns in the Cape, several hundred units go a long way to sort of solving this problem. And I think the scale becomes, when you have a conversation about the cost of this, the cost per unit is absolutely astronomical. And I think that part of this as well is if you look at these year-on deed restrictions, a lot of these programs work by actually buying up existing units, right? Existing houses that are built. Either people gift them, they're given an incentive to put it into a year-on deed restriction, maybe in forgiveness of property taxes or some sort of creative way, so that we can also get to the, you can also have this sort of spread throughout, our housing. It's a little sort of different as you transition into the lower and then the mid Cape on scale. But I'm actually really excited about what's possible. And I'm really encouraged by, I think, the commitment I'm seeing, in Provincetown and Truro.
Commissioner Bergstrom was chomping at the bit.
Sure.
Not jumping too much, but housing is a huge issue, and as senators know, we've been to many summits where it's been brought out and stuff. And I try to limit the time that we have here to county issues, but I have to touch on housing because it is such a huge issue. The comments I hear from people around the Cape is, well, we're never going to build our way out of the housing crisis. In other words, the laws of supply and demand are not going to help us. That they feel, as I think Commissioner Lyons said, is the only way we're going to deal with it is looking at community character, understanding the needs of the people within our towns, the policemen, the firemen, the office workers, and so on, and the temporary workers, and say, well, let's target housing toward those groups, rather than say, well, we're going to build a lot of housing. I mean, retired people would like to have housing, but it's not critical to our communities. People who want to have short-term rentals would love to have housing, but that's not good. So we have to, I say I think the towns should look at what they're doing in trying to meet the critical existing needs of people within the community. And, by and large, even though you're right, it's an existential crisis, the towns have been doing quite a bit. I mean, the county itself has contributed to housing projects in Truro, in Orleans, in Eastham. We've been out there. And the individual towns have also done this, not just with housing production, but by passing deed restrictions, buying up housing, all sorts of interesting ways of trying to encourage long-term resident housing. So that's the eye of the needle you have to tread. And I say that not because I'm unsympathetic to other people who want housing, but because I see, there's always been a constituency on Cape Cod that doesn't want to do much. Because the community character is important, and that they've raised their ugly heads, not ugly head, but they've raised their heads in many instances, and they say this is too much. So politically, and to try to maintain the
There is a balance.
constituency for increased housing, increased development, I think we have to be careful. And so that's pretty much the challenge going forward. The medium house price in Chatham, by the way, is $1 million.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And Chatham's doing a lot.
I mean, you'd have to build a lot of houses in Chatham to bring that down to even a small amount.
Yeah.
And we also don't, and unfortunately, and I don't want to go off on this, if I'm a developer with money, affordable housing is not where the money is. The money is building somebody McMansion for $7 million. So, I mean, I don't envy you in looking at this issue, but it's a multifaceted issue, and I think it needs cooperation from the community, from the towns, and from everybody else.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you.
Before we get much further, I promised our administrator that he would have at least a few minutes to go over some of the key items in this memo. So if you can just indulge us for just a moment. Michael.
Thank you for that, and happy birthday.
Your
Thank you.
happy birthday.
On Monday.
That's the most important part. But no, I think actually,
Fireworks up there.
Pardon?
There'll be fireworks.
Not fireworks, but a dance party.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
But I think actually the senators both covered, much of what was on the list, and I think some of the stuff that's here is it is perceived as being very county centric, but it does have an impact to the services we provide. Especially some of the challenges we have covering capital costs that are pretty much 100% related to the court system. We do our ask there is just as the Senator Sear said, just communicating with DCAM and being able to open up that door and having those conversations about how we can sort of formalize moving some of our capital items to DCAM rather than trying to fund those internally and ourselves. Excuse me, the challenge with that, when we have to do a capital project and admittedly we get reimbursed for it, depending on the project, but that reimbursement or that capital project and that bonding ties up our own bonding. We've got 70 some odd million plus another $100 million worth of capital improvements that we're looking at through our facilities master plan. And so when it gets tied up in court centric issues, then it sort of restricts our ability to move forward with some of the critical things that we have to do. I just wanted to touch briefly on dredge grant funding. I think the senators addressed that as well, and I appreciate that. We do have a really good dredge program. 14 of the 15 towns avail themselves of that program, and we want to see that continue and become even more robust. As the senators know, it's a challenge. We've got time of year restrictions, understandably, that we have to work around. But I think our permitting, getting projects permitted, is a challenge that you might be able to help with, as well as continuing the state grant funding that's existed for a number of decades. And then just the Clean Water Trust and the Aqua Fund. Really, I think you covered all of them.
Okay.
So I appreciate that.
Added to the.
I was.
Yes, this is the first I'm seeing of this.
Okay, that's because it's in draft form. This
Okay.
letter has been under discussion with the Cape and Islands Municipal Managers Association, with the Cape and Islands Municipal Leaders Association, and the superintendents. At the Cape and Islands Municipal Leaders Association, we actually invited the superintendents to come meet with us, and we had a very engaging conversation about enrollment projections in some areas where maybe the state's numbers need to be refined, but the projections that need to be scrutinized. So this was drafted by the superintendents. The managers, I think, have signed off on it. I think the superintendents will sign off on it this week. And the Cape and Islands Municipal Leaders Association signed off on it the other day. So this is sort of going through an internal review. I promised Dr. Mark Smith, who sort of drafted this, that I would at least share the draft with you, so you kind of had a heads up on what's coming your way.
Sure. I mean, I do want to be very just candid that we are looking at an incredibly tight budget. The governor is going to release her budget by the end of the month. Because of federal action, we're going to have over $1 billion hit to our Medicaid program, to the Mass Health program. Bless you. In addition to other structural deficits that exist, I think we're talking about having over a $3 billion gap in the FY27 budget. So what that means for any earmarking, I'm very sort of cautious about what might be possible, unfortunately. And I think if you look out over the next several years, effectively these, to pay for tax cuts for millionaires and billionaires, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts will be losing billions of dollars each and every year over the next several years. This is a state, by the way, we pay more per capita in federal income taxes to the federal government than any other state. But I just want to be very, unfortunately, I fear that we're going to be in a very restrictive environment. So love any good idea like this that does things in a collaborative manner. But I'm really trying to sort of manage expectations,
Sure.
and maybe we'll under promise and then can over deliver a bit. But
Yeah.
really, really sort of more concerned about our fiscal environment. Really, I think, I mean, in the early days of the pandemic, I think we were really concerned about that as well. But, I think we're going to have a few.
Yeah.
Well, this is right. Like, we can project this out, and I think we know what these cuts are.
Understood. Let me just put up sort of a different spin on this request.
Yeah.
There is a concern among a number of municipal officials that the state's projections in terms of enrollment are a bit rosy.
Oh.
All right. So the concern is that we may be committing more construction dollars than is necessary. And so the purpose of doing a more deeper dive in this is to have better realistic numbers. Now, the county's spent a lot of money through its regional housing strategy. Over at the commission, we've got a lot more data, a lot more information. There may be another way to skin this cat, utilizing maybe some of the resources that we've already spent
Yeah.
some dollars
We
on.
do have a lot of that information.
Yeah.
And I know this.
That we have it.
So I've
I know this is
flagged
already-
with Christie,
yeah.
Senatorial, that
Yeah.
we might be able to.
I know this is in draft form, but
Yeah.
and it deals with a number of issues. But one thing to keep in mind is that we're likely going to be taking up another look at the Chapter 70 formula. Like, a commission is going to be established to take another look at this, and so there might be an avenue within this to have something that takes a look at demographic trends directly related to school enrollment. There's a number of things that I think we would like to get in there. One thing that's going to be included this time around, which is important for our region, is school busing costs, which is a huge cost to our school districts. Big impact on local budgets, and schools are the biggest chunk of municipal budget. So a lot of that I think would be helpful. And then I think there's room for some tweaks around how the formula is allocated, so that rising tide raises all ships, but also that places like the Cape that hasn't been risen as high as some of the other kind of gateway cities, and they never will because of different factors around poverty and economic hardship. But how do we raise our boats just a little bit more to make it slightly more equitable? I think that's definitely an open discussion. Why this Chapter 70 formula commission is being drafted so soon after we just passed the biggest reform in 25 years. So, it wasn't until we took up the Student Opportunity Act a few years ago. I think it was 1994 the last time we restructured it, and we're taking a much closer look a lot more quickly this time around, which I think is a good thing. And so there might be some opportunity here. We'd probably have to tailor it a little bit more to focus on the schools, but in our region. But I think that's a vehicle that might be appropriate for this.
If I can just add in there, remember, in some of these conversations with the superintendents is school choice is also sort of skewing different things. That's the formula I get for up in the Boston area. You're in a neighborhood. It's not a wealthy neighborhood. Might even have crime, poor schools, and you have a chance to send your kid to a better school within that district. I get that. On the other hand, why is that? I mean, we could change the formula of how we do these things, but the other thing is, within small towns, you can take kids from Truro, put them in Wellfleet or Provincetown, and it just kills the budget of that other town where those kids are now displaced to another school. And it's not really that there's special ed educations that are better, facilities are better. So, I mean, this was just something that was being discussed. And is that really a beneficial formula for this region?
Yeah.
So that will come up in some of these conversations, and it's something to think about. I know we have very good intentions when we do these things, and sometimes the outcomes aren't always great.
Yeah.
So,
and we've done some things that actually really help our region,
exactly.
like the
I'm
per.
not saying that we don't.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Like the per pupil cost is something that was, is always something that's a bit contentious between our more rural areas and
Right.
and the cities, and we were able to raise that to the highest level. I mean, it's over $100 now.
Yeah.
So it's and it was like half of that before then, right? And that really benefits our more rural kind of town communities in a way that is
Between that and
really
the
helpful.
healthcare is really, it's the towns that are really carrying that. And there's, the healthcare is its own other animal. But these, and this is universal. This is nationwide that we're experiencing these things. But that is, it was interesting that the formula came up, and I said, I get that.
Yeah, there's two factors we're dealing with. The biggest factor for us that is actually adversely hurting us when it comes to the Chapter 70 formula is property valuations. The chapters, the Student Opportunity Act was not designed to benefit communities like my hometown of Truro. It was designed to benefit communities like Yarmouth and Dennis and Barnstable, by Mashpee.
And can I say you've done it?
When
you look at our budget,
Yeah.
the work that you have done has been a huge help in dealing with some of these.
And Yarmouth and Dennis have been able to continue to do well under student opportunity. The property valuation increases haven't been as high. There's also some other factors in the formula that benefit them, but Barnstable in particular, because of escalating home values in certain villages in Barnstable, really are sort of adversely affecting Barnstable in this formula.
Right.
And that's something that we sort of we didn't anticipate in 2018 that we would see such like rapid escalation in home valuations. This is also hurting us when it comes to something like called the rural school aid formula, something that my former colleague Adam Hines led the way on. He's from the Berkshires. I supported this. It was a Senate initiative. And this is meant to help rural schools, right? Places that are far flung, places like the Outer Cape, Lower Cape. We were receiving rural school aid in some cases. That is again diminished because of the escalating property values. So this creates a real sort of challenge for us.
Right.
When you have the statewide conversations about equitable distribution, it gets, we're also sort of in the business of making sure that we're, educating children across Massachusetts. How do you maintain Massachusetts as a leader nationally? But that's a real factor. On school choice, interestingly, until the high school was renovated, the school district that had the largest participation in school choice anywhere in the state was Nauset.
Yes.
So when you really talk to the school superintendents, the shuffling of students between not only the charter school programs, but also through school choice, this was a strategy for Outer and Lower Cape communities that were declining on enrollment back in the days when I was on was the student representative of the school committee. So that sort of shifted now. Actually, this renovation has shifted students back, and so we're seeing a real shift there. But I think these sort of conversations projecting out are really wise. We are not going in a positive direction in enrollment almost anywhere. There's some exceptions, and I think that this, the one piece in here I'd flag is probably maybe not necessarily worth our time to really explore. When you look at ADU impacts, ADU adoption has actually been quite low. Our number of towns passed these in the years leading up to the Affordable Homes Act. It was a handful. Statewide, I think we've seen about just over 700. So, and the reason I think this is happening is that the cost to build is so expensive. So, my parents could probably build an ADU in their backyard and it would cost them like $600,000. And so how the hell do you then turn that around and have that be an affordable rental for someone or even a manageable sort of mortgage? So the ADU piece, I'd be sort of less concerned. There's also some really good research and data that we've looked at, from the housing committee perspective around suburban communities often, right? Suburban communities are often concerned about changing zoning to open up development to have like school impact costs. And there's some really interesting information about how that sort of plays out or how that sort of doesn't play out. I think this would be very helpful from a Cape and Islands perspective as well to sort of understand this. At the end of the day, if you're going to have the schools and the districts that exist as they are, you have a number of fixed costs in our schools, and I think a conversation about how do you regionalize that? How do you actually try to boost some of the enrollment in these schools? We have kids in our neck of the woods, Sheila. We have classes that have literally a handful of kids. So I think this is timely. Let's just be creative about how. I don't know if this is gonna. I don't know if we'll have the ability to just do earmark funding in the way that we've done.
Exactly.
But let's figure it out.
Yeah.
Great. Commissioner Bergstrom.
Yeah, the county has invested, especially through the Cape Cod Commission, has invested a lot of money in doing studies, housing studies, demographic studies. I don't know that anybody can predict the population or the type of population we're going to have in 5 or 10 years, but really critical to understanding what the school needs are. In my experience here on the Cape, we've downsized our schools as the young population has left. And this is directly, as you probably know, when you touched on it, due to housing costs. What type of housing costs? You know, a lot of people push for rentals because they feel that that would serve a population that would more likely have kids in the schools than let's say home, because a lot of young families are not in a position to buy a house, and also younger population are more transient. They may live on the Cape for 5 years and then get a better job somewhere else. You know, Vera, do you know how much the commission was given by the ARPA funds to do a housing study? Do you remember?
Oh.
It's
It's
got to be.
over $1 million.
It's over $1 million.
Yeah, over $1 million.
The reality is they've offered to
Right.
help on this.
That study is
And I
available.
believe that they have data
Yeah.
and information that might help us
Could be
get
helpful.
some of the way there.
Yeah.
Encourage Superintendent Smith to reach out to Christy Senatori. They've done a great job in compiling lots of information. I think there's a way we might be able to
Yeah.
help deal with this. So you're right. Let's be creative.
I also just want to be clear, when I'm talking about how do we meet the housing needs of our region and each of our communities, I'm talking about what we've actually labeled under the law, what's called attainable housing, right? That's year-round deed restricted to really meet the needs, sustain the population. We have the reality we have here. This is the oldest county in New England. We lose over 1,000 families a year, middle-income families a year, because they can't afford the cost of housing. You know, any entity in the business of providing goods and services here, whether you are a town, a school district, the hospital, a nursing home, any sort of business, right? Your number one challenge is where to get the workforce, right? And so, but I just want to be clear, is like that's what, when we talk about solving our housing crisis or putting a dent in our housing crisis, that's what we're talking about. We're not talking about sort of unfettered development that is geared towards basically a second or third or fourth home market, right? And I think the reality is we have what actually really encourages me is the actions I've seen by our towns and the real track record that the region has in tackling big issues and doing it in a collaborative way. That's something many places don't do. I think we have a benefit of, having an identity of, where we work together or we see ourselves as Cape Codders or Islanders, and then come up with solutions to address big challenges. But I just want folks to be clear, and especially people who are listening and watching, this is what we're really talking about, because the reality is you're going to struggle to run, whether it's a county or a town or a school district or a hospital, or any sort of business, right? This hordes of people we welcome each and every year. Already most employers already have the burden of having to try to figure out how do they provide housing for their workforce. That was something that, restaurant and hospitality folks did 20, 30 years ago. Now that's the reality for most all, businesses, most all services here. So that's really what the thrust and what the focus is, not in this sort of like unfettered, we have a red hot real estate market here. And I think that's going to probably continue pending erosion or some sort of natural catastrophe. I don't know.
Right.
So.
There we go. Well, listen, I know we're pressed for time. Are there any other final comments or closing comments or thoughts?
Yeah, anything you want to highlight?
Add before we bring this to a close?
Just thank the county for being really helpful partners. When I think of one of the biggest challenges we had in recent years was the COVID-19 pandemic, Barnstable County was part of the linchpin that, helped us have one of the most successful coordinated responses, our high vaccination rates, that problem solving. I think continuing that spirit of can-do-itness, of collaboration, really is something I'm grateful for. We look to you folks for. We view this as, you're unique in Massachusetts. There's not many functional county governments. Barton Dukes County has a county government as well. But Jillian, you miss Martha's Vineyard yet? But no, I mean, just really thank you, and thank you, Michael, for your team and your work. And I'm sure there will be unexpected challenges that come, and we'll lean on the county.
We have an excellent staff here that does really good work.
Yeah.
That's able to
But we all
augment and assist.
Yeah.
we
all
all
of these
appreciate
efforts.
the help that you provide us, though.
Yeah.
And getting our job done.
Well, I just want to echo yeah, Julian's comments, and I mean, you guys are great partners to have, and do really incredible work for the residents across the Cape, and we're really appreciative. And you know, I think this collaboration is really helpful, coming in and hearing from you, and you know, the close contact that we have with each other, I think is great to best serve this region. You know, Julian alluded to it, like the next couple of years are going to be really tough from a state perspective in terms of billions of dollars cut to Massachusetts. Then that's just our budget. That's just our state budget, let alone the billions of dollars cut to technology and science. You know, I represent Woods Hole, which is basically a federally funded entity in terms of science and technology. You know, we have NOAA Fisheries in my district. They have had a ton of cuts. There's just a lot of cuts impacting our region, none bigger than the cuts that we're going to see to Cape Cod healthcare and our health providers across the state, but particularly our hospitals, which are more reliant on Medicare and Medicaid and have a payer mix that is almost entirely federally funded dollars. I mean, you're going to see a lot of people hurting economically and hurting from a healthcare perspective because of the billions of dollars in federal cuts to pay for tax cuts for the rich. And I think it's our job, you know, at the state level to do our best to mitigate that hurt and make sure that people have the food benefits they need, have the health care that they deserve to be healthy and have a healthy family. And we're going to do our best to try and provide that. I know you guys are going to do your best at the county level too, but there's a lot of headwinds, and so you know, your collaboration and partnership to protect the health and livelihoods of the people at Cape Cod is really invaluable and deeply appreciated.
You know, we have a summer coming up, and also there's a hold on visas, and that's not your bailiwick, that's a federal level, but that is going to also have a huge impact on this region and among many other things. So I don't know where he's getting his gas prices, but I know in the Outer Cape where we still, you know, it takes a long way to get out of Cape Cod, and they're making sure they have the higher prices down there. So there's a lot of, but you know, Woods Hole, all of that I really worry about because it's crucial, not just to the Earth's ocean, but to our own local waters of what they do. And yeah, we're in for a bad time.
Yeah. Not to mention I think our third or fourth largest employer here in our entire region. So
and then we have
you know,
the Gestapo,
big issue.
you know, the threat of that, and that will take dollars and energy and money and pain.
Yeah, this is a disaster. Any more years of it.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
We have to hang
Thank you.
together.
Appreciate
Okay.
it.
Be all people. Thanks.
We will have
To be better by the party.
I know. Yeah, we were waiting for our invitation. No, really. You know, we'll put our dancing shoes on. I know Dylan will be up there.
Thank you both.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
So good to see you. Good to see you.
I'm gonna wave from here.
Picture.
Oh, do you want a picture?
Oh,
Okay. Sure.
Shoot above the shoe.
Above the shoe.
Yeah. And why don't you come
Just
behind
one
the-
from.
come behind the,
Yeah, well, it's not where it-
Come on in here.
Come on in.
Nowhere near as bad as it was.
Poor
Yeah,
guy. You wanna
poor
come, Mike? You
foot.
wanna-
Oh,
8 o'clock at the breadcrumbs.
There we go.
Smile,
Is that good?
everybody. Yep. Oh, no, I can see his feet.
It's okay.
I'm
Part of
a-
the- Thank you.
Oh, that's
Well
too
done.
bad. Is it the red?
Julian, thank you very much.
The red room.
Okay, I'll, if I can, I will.
I know it's late.
I'll come and say hello.
Thank you.
All right, you have to have that up.
Friday.
I know.
That's terrible.
Okay. Mhm. Yeah. So we're going to go back to the agenda, and we're on general business item 6C, and that is proposed ordinance 26, capital fund reappropriation, with our finance director and our administrators. So take it away, Carol,
Good morning.
welcome back.
Thank you. The facilities department is in need of a critical need of a replacement of a chiller piping lines. We replaced the chiller. That was a capital appropriation. We would like to request that you authorize a transfer, if you will, for capital projects from the first district roof replacement, which was not a critical project, to support the need for the piping lines to be replaced.
So this is a reappropriation of an existing capital allocation.
That is correct.
So that's important to know.
Okay.
So, and the amount of money we're talking about is 125,000.
That is correct.
Okay. Do I have a motion?
Mr. Chair, I move to approve the proposed ordinance 26 to be named capital fund reappropriation.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, is there any more discussion on this item? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
The motion carries unanimously. The next item, item 6D, is on proposed ordinance 26 to be named on supplemental budget request for a federal indirect, internal, indirect, and external rate study. And again, I'm going to turn this back over to Carol.
Yes.
Finance Director,
Explain.
for an explanation and answer any questions. Carol.
Thank you. Earlier, when I had presented a budget transfer to you, we spoke a little bit about indirect cost rates
Actually, we've talked about this topic on a regular basis
Mhm.
quite often.
Yeah.
So
and an
it
external
surprised me that you're back.
and an external rate study. And so we have some departments of the county, as you are aware, and the public may be aware as well, such as the IT department that provides services to other municipalities. And those rates haven't been studied in over 10 years. And it's really a critical means by which the county can come to reality of what does it cost to provide services to these communities.
Right,
It's just information.
exactly.
In addition to that, we have internal departments that we provide services to, such as the dredge, for example. And the dredge receives services from finance, administration, HR. And to understand what it costs to provide those services is critical.
Didn't we try to get this funded once before? I
I
know you brought it up.
I have brought it up. I have not come this far with it.
Okay.
I've kind of sat,
Yeah,
thought that we would
Okay.
be part of the budget. We, in the financial fiscal forecast that I presented to you, I suggested that we undertake this kind of work.
Right.
In addition, we spoke earlier about a federal indirect cost rate. It would be very nice for the county to have that kind of information to decide if it wants to move forward with that approval at the federal level.
Right.
There's consequences to that, though. We take in some very small grants, 20,000 under, and if 46% of that $20,000 grant were to support the administration, that leaves little to perform the work.
Right.
So there are consequences which we would need to consider, but having the information in a model that can be updated internally moving forward is critical. So that's what this is bringing forward. The request for your consideration for a proposed ordinance to conduct this work. There is an RFP out right now, and that will be closing soon. And so nevertheless, this would be funded through your unreserved fund balance in the amount of $200,000.
very good. Any comments, questions? Commissioner Lyon?
Carol, you do an excellent job, and you have brought us to a good place. And if these are tools that help you do your job even better and to be able to give us the information we need, I don't have a problem with it.
Commissioner Bergstrom? Any
No, I don't
thoughts?
have any problems. I think this is a good recommendation and we should follow up on it again.
Can you give us an estimate, Carol, in terms of, let's assume that tomorrow the study was done and we had a better overhead rate. Over time, can you give us a sense of how much money we might be able to generate from this? How much is sort of we're unable to capture?
Generate
Is there any
insight.
way, or is that too difficult an exercise? Maybe you could probably help us figure that out once the study's done, but I'm just curious right now if you wanted to take a wild guess.
So I'm always very reluctant to throw out numbers
know
that
you-
I'm not certain of. So I would ask that, undertaking this study will give you those answers.
Yeah.
And again, it would allow us to update it and that information internally moving forward,
Right.
which to me is a critical piece.
Right, and that's information.
Well, that response does not surprise me. That's great. All right, do I have a motion?
Mr. Chair, I move to approve the proposed ordinance 26 to be named supplemental budget request for a federal internal, indirect, and external rate study.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Is there any more discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Carol. All right, next item on the agenda is, let's see, Mr. Stephen Buckley. We put an agenda item on here at his request. Steve, come on to the table. Make yourself at home. I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself for
Sure,
the record and for the folks watching at home.
sure. My name is, excuse me. My name is Steve Buckley. I'm from Chatham. Grew up in Chatham. Spent 25 years down in Washington, D.C. as an environmental engineer for the federal government. So I know quite a bit about environmental impact statements, having worked on them myself. And now that I'm semi-retired, instead of playing golf, I go to public meetings and critique them in my mind.
Yeah.
Group.
Yeah. that's
But also
great.
critique them,
I got you.
occasionally, overtly. And this is one of those, this is an occasion for that. I have been going, I think the meetings for the Cape Cod Canal bridges have been going on for
From the beginning.
longer than 10 years.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And so anyway, I've been, yes, watching it with the eye of someone's like, well, what's missing, what's not being done right, and so forth and so on. And as you may have heard, there's actually a push at the federal level to streamline the permitting process, which is what they mean is they mean that environmental impact statements have gotten too long
Mhm.
and take too much time and are easy to challenge in court and so forth and so on. And so they're trying to figure out something that literally, as we speak, there are discussions going on at the congressional level to do that.
Mhm.
So anyway, the Cape Cod Canal bridges seems to be a classic case of what they're trying to stop as far as streamlining goes, because after 10 years, they finally came out. This is just one of two volumes of a draft environmental impact statement that recently received public comments. They requested public comments on the draft, and they will issue and when I say they, I mean Federal Highway Administration, but primarily it's the Massachusetts DOT that's carrying all the water, so to speak. And they had their own document back in the fall called an environmental impact report, but essentially they're the same document. They just wanted to split them up because the federal people weren't allowed to say things like climate change and
Yeah, so
Exactly right.
And,
It's not in the lexicon.
Deletes those references.
environmental justice and things like that. So they said, well, let's just do the same thing twice. And of course, people probably whoever, yes. So people might be suffering from document fatigue,
Mhm.
if not from one, but from two. And so this is close. Like I said, this is two double-sided things, and I did not read the whole thing. I don't think anybody read the whole thing except the consultants who wrote it. But in any event, I focused in on the parts that I thought were the most glaring as far as it going. And having gone to these meetings, every time I tried to steer it around, I'd be like the only person not from the Bourne area at these meetings, because the meetings were always in Bourne. And so I'd say, well, what about down Cape? What, if we build these nice new bridges, and first I want to say that I'm not an opponent of the bridges. A lot of people think that whenever you ask questions about a particular project, it must be, well, if you're not with us, you're against us.
Exactly.
It's like, no, I'm just wanting to ask the questions that need to be answered before something's built and not afterwards and say, why didn't we think of that? And this is actually what's supposed to happen with environmental impact statements. Is supposed to be a look before you leap exercise. Of course, you get carried away and it takes years and years. So they needed some guardrails, I guess you could say. And that's what they're doing at the federal level now. Anyway, at all those meetings, whenever I said that, well, you could tell they would keep shoving it back. Well, the impact area is only around the canal. Like, well, I think, and if there's a picture up on the screen, Mr. Dutton has just put up on the screen that shows, this is the Mass DOT's, this is taken from the draft environmental impact statement. And it shows, and they call it the new Sagamore Bridge, but it's actually two side-by-side twin bridges.
Yes.
And this is just one, of course, going one way. And so even before they came up with this picture, I said I knew that whenever the discussions that this is going to be meant to clear up the congestion, so that yes, on Labor Day weekend, Memorial Day weekend, and all the weekends in between those two times, that we could hopefully not have to worry about what time is it or what day is it if we want to go on or off the Cape, and even in the off season during rush hour and things like that, or if there's an accident on the bridge and so forth and so on. So anyway, so as you can see from that is that I knew that it was going to look like that, which is great. If you're that person driving on the road right there, you're going, okay, I don't have to worry about a backup at the bridges. You've got an appointment in Boston, or if you're coming back, or if you're trying to or friends are coming this way, essentially it'll look the same way on both bridges coming and going, with that extra lane on the right, which they keep referring to as a merge lane. The thing is that, yes, you won't have to worry about somebody flying in from the right just as you're coming up on the bridge, and whether or not they see you in that lane.
I've had that experience,
And
right?
people are tapping their brakes and everything, so forth and so on. And so, yes, they'll be able to go merge right in. But then they don't even have to merge back onto another thing. They keep saying, well, this is not a travel lane. It's like, well, you can go from one side of the bridge to the other and stay in that lane. So it's a local travel lane.
So goes down
And
to-
so either way, whether we quibble about the number of lanes, is that the idea is that, and there's also a 10-foot breakdown lane.
Which is great.
And 10 feet, these lanes here are 12 foot. The ones we have now are 10.
Right.
Those skinny little
Yeah.
lanes are 10, which
Yes.
were at one time, so they're quote obsolete now. But yes, so they'll be the same width as your regular highway travel lanes. And then of course a 10-foot lane would be enough, yes, to safely pull off at least. I'm not sure I want to pull over on the bridge, but on any highway, I'd like to pull way off. But at least traffic can continue to go, even if somebody breaks down, they'll be able to pull off. And then on the other side there, that's like 4 feet on the other side. So lots of elbow room compared to what we have now. And so these bridges they're higher capacity bridges. And every time I try to bring it back to that, but that's just a merge lane. It's like, so the sense I have gotten from going to all these meetings over the years is that we don't want to talk about regional impacts, and also if you read the language, and like I said, I wasn't sure if we'd be able to see the pictures, but the language that they actually put in for the sentence, there's a single sentence. And I made some extra copies in case they weren't there, but the single sentence that in the draft, which I suspect they will not change, It didn't change it, and it's virtually the same sentence that the state had in their state impact statement. Says projected travel time improvements for the build alternative
Mhm.
are not expected to generate additional trips to Cape Cod as discussed in the following sections. And then it goes on, blah, 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 blah. So it's all very counter alternative. And it's saying that this is going to clear up traffic congestion, but nobody in Boston or Connecticut or Rhode Island or anywhere else is going to know about it. And they won't change their plans at all. They'll always say, I'm not going to Cape Cod because there's too much. How do I get caught in the traffic? Honey, I just saw in the news there's a new bridge. It's like, what are you talking about? I didn't see anything. So it's all very intuitive to those of us who are familiar with traveling over the bridges, that this is actually one of the things. If you build it, they will come. Or when I say they mean the people who are now currently discouraged from coming at certain times or at all,
Right.
will now not be discouraged anymore. And they call it induced travel, but basically I think it's more along the lines of discouraging. And they're not encouraging people to come to the Cape so much as taking away the discouraging part. And when you stop discouraging people from doing something, anything, they tend to do it. So go ahead.
I have lived on the Cape.
And I'm sorry, my hearing aids are acting up, so I might ask you to repeat yourself.
I have lived on the Cape for over 50 years. I have never had anyone ever said to me that they didn't come to Cape, or they did not come to the Cape Cod because of the traffic over the bridge. Not a single person in 50 years said, oh, I would have come to the Cape this week, but the traffic on the bridge was too much. I didn't want to do it. Even the people who spend 2 weeks here, if they had to spend an extra half an hour to get over the bridge, that didn't discourage them. So I understand where you're coming from. I've heard this argument from others that somehow fixing those bridges is going to have a flood of people come here who were never here before. And I'm telling you, that ain't going to happen unless you can show me in statistics and real time exactly how many more people are going to have. Who interview them? Tell me, okay, we know that there's going to be 20% more people. Can you do that?
The thing is, the people who wrote this, it's not for me to prove them wrong. It's for them to explain how they came up with their. So whenever they put this, whenever the government is supposed to set the way this is supposed to work is plan. It's basically public planning. They said, hey, there's a problem. We're trying to address it. Here's a range of alternatives. Let's ask the local people what they think. Maybe they know something we don't. And sometimes they do. And having worked on that side, on both sides, it's like, hey, maybe something, and maybe there are people, and in this case, maybe there are, but it's not. And they've hired a consultant to run they've taken numbers from Mass DOT, gave them to the consultant, said, here's the data that we are giving you, and now we're paying you to tell us, what you think is going to happen. And this was single person, or with a computer program, and we've heard about how never mind, this is just regular computer program, not artificial intelligence, which we're supposed to be checking on because sometimes it doesn't think it out. So when I say to them, well, okay, I got an engineering degree, you should be able to explain it to me how something that is a reasonable question to say, gee, might more people come? And so it's not for me to just
cut you off. We're sort of approaching the 10-minute mark.
Oh, okay. Well, anyway, but it comes down to the fact that I think that there's a question mark here.
Okay.
And Ron may be right, or I'm just saying I don't know, and it hasn't been explained. And somebody should explain it. And that's where I think the county should do the DRI to say, maybe they'll come up with something, another perspective that can explain to the local people.
What would come out of that? What do you hope to come out of that? Suppose they did say, suppose they said, all right, 20% more people are going to come to the Cape because we're fixing the bridges. What do you do then?
Well, then now it's a planning document, because in the regional policy plan, which is kind of trying to look out, say, well, what kind of wastewater treatment and other structures, infrastructure do we need? If it says, well, gee, it says nobody's going to come. Well, we're not going to crank that into our forecast for how large the wastewater treatment plant's going to be, because it says right here.
Well, my thing is, I think we need to have safe bridges. I don't like going over that bridge. They're small lanes. You can scrape your car on one side. I mean, I straddle that lane.
Oh, yeah.
And people have to wait a half a minute until I'm on the other side. You don't like it? That's too bad. And I go as fast as I can. And, but the thing is, it is still gonna funnel into a 2-lane highway. So there is gonna be something somewhere that's gonna hold people up. I mean, unless we build, now we're gonna make Route 6, a highway, a super highway. And there's not a lot of space to do that. And it may come, that may happen. That's the other thing that could happen from this in another 10 years. You know what? There's too much of a glut right after the bridge. They're all kind of funneled down. So the glut is on the other side of the bridge, not on the, coming inside of the bridge. So there's gonna be a problem. I know that. And I agree. I agree with everything you're saying, but I don't know, there's
Yeah.
I
just want to say,
train has left that
I'm
station.
concerned about more impact onto the Cape, and I know my commissioners,
Yeah,
we're very concerned about more traffic.
We believe in
but
treading lightly.
We just don't know that creating a bottleneck is gonna solve that.
I think it would be a good thing to have a bottleneck. It would be another.
Some people say we should remove the old bridge and not build another one, but I'm not there yet.
Yeah, you could have ferry service. That'd even be better.
Well,
Fill it in. That was another suggestion. Fill
well,
it
anyway,
in.
it's just that I think they've turned a blind eye, and I think it should be eyes wide open. So whatever happens, we should be as informed as possible, so that we won't go, oh, who could have seen that coming? It's like, so, and if this didn't qualify as a discretionary DRI, so to speak,
Sure.
then what would?
Mhm.
I mean, why even have the paragraph here in the Cape Cod Commission Act that says, hey, if a particular project doesn't quite fit in this, that, but I'd be mostly interested to know, and whether the commission has been saying, oh, well, the state says we don't have to do it. Well, okay, well, if you don't have to or can't.
Yeah.
Well, they don't.
And it's like, so.
Well, I have to bring this item to a closure past the time allocated for this. We have other business, Stephen, that we have to address. Thanks for coming before us
Okay.
Yeah,
and
and I appreciate it.
presenting us, as you can sense, the board. I don't think is overly sympathetic to the request, but
Mhm.
we can bring it up again
But
at the
we're
next
also-
meeting.
But you're also not on deaf ears. We understand what you're saying and we
Mhm.
hear you and we're not opposed to, we're not like, that's
Yeah.
crazy. No, we get it, but what can we do?
The only question I have for you is, did you submit this comment to Mass DOT and Federal Highway as part of your?
Oh, yeah, and
So
so,
you have asked them to
yeah,
address this
and
question.
who know, wait until the final will come out
Okay,
next month,
I think what you did was.
and then
We'll go.
maybe it'll be a moot point, and it'll go, oh,
Great.
Yeah,
Steve
they
was
listen.
right.
Yeah,
You know,
I appreciate your
But-
reaching out to us. I
Mhm.
appreciate you taking the time to come here.
so,
Thank you very much.
okay, well,
And-
and I appreciate I would like to wait and see what they do, and
Okay.
maybe come back and say,
Yeah, we can-
based on what they do or don't do, see if anything
You
needs.
know how to access on public comments, so
Yep, yep.
you know how we work, so.
Thank you
thanks
very
again
much.
for coming.
Good to see you.
Moving on with our agenda, we have item
Oh, yeah.
Commissioner consent, new business.
No.
We have any new business, Commissioner? No. Okay, consent agenda. Do I have a motion?
I hope that we, approve the, Commissioner's consent agenda, item A through T.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion to move the consent agenda. There are quite a few items that are on there. A lot of them have to do with appointments. Any discussion, any questions? Hearing none, all those in favor of moving the consent agenda items A, E, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Carries unanimously. The next item on our agenda will be commissioners' reports. Commissioner Bergstrom,
I have a report right now.
Commissioner Lyons,
No, I don't know.
we don't. upcoming business, we're gonna go to our next agenda item review. Mr. Dutton.
Thank you. You have, just a reminder that you, at your next meeting on January 28th, will be going to Falmouth. So it's the first of our offsite meetings, that will be in Falmouth. Tentatively, we have a presentation on coastal resilience, a dredge update, and likely a Clean Water Center update, from the Clean Water Center. So
Because our Clean Water Center is doing a lot of work.
an awful lot of work in the Upper Cape.
Yes.
Absolutely, all over, but certainly in the Upper Cape.
Very good. Any questions for the administrator on our upcoming agenda?
Sounds good.
Any administrator staff reports?
Thank you,
Mr. Dutton.
Mr. Chair. I have one item, and then I'm going to ask two other staff to join me.
Okay.
But I do want to just give you an update on the budget. So the budget process, we have collected now all the budgets from all the departments. It's now time for our internal review. We've done internal reviews with the department heads. I don't expect any radical changes to your budget. But we were tentatively scheduled to introduce the budget to you on January 28th. Since we will be in Falmouth, we're going to head for the February 11 meeting, so that we will be here, and I don't want to bore everybody in Falmouth going over our budget.
Exactly.
Because I realize I like the numbers, but I realize not everybody does. So
Yeah, they have
No,
their own.
Yeah, I think
that
the value in having our first meeting of the month here is to make sure that we're dealing with county business and the county centric stuff. When we're on the road, the goal, I think, is to engage in a more
kind of
local flavored, whether it's that town or that region, issues that they're working on, things that they're dealing with, and working with the county on, so that we can have a better understanding of what their needs are and their problems are. So I think that should continue to be our approach. So I appreciate holding off on any further budget discussion until we do that here. The time for the meeting on the 28th, what time are we talking about again?
let me double check, and I will let you know before the meeting ends. I believe it's at 11.
Yeah, I just want
Okay,
commissioners
so,
to
yeah.
know we're providing sufficient time to get to the site. All right,
see.
so
Yeah.
11:30.
what that means is that.
Long way from Wellfleet to Fairfield County.
Right,
It is.
but also, don't be shy about bringing a snack or something to eat, particularly if we go into the lunch hour a little bit.
It is 11:30, so I was wrong.
Okay.
11:30.
Very good.
We will go into the lunch hour.
We will, yeah, and the thing is we want to make these meetings convenient for our hosts and the people that we're meeting with.
So maybe we should have. the
Yeah, we
meeting
don't want them to
Capitol
look at
campus.
us like, Jesus, when are we gonna get rid of them? No, believe me, that's how it used to be received, believe
Okay,
me.
so Michael, was there staff that you wanted to?
I do. I will introduce Misty Niemeyer, our AmeriCorps director, and I know Misty just wanted to introduce a couple of items relative to AmeriCorps. So I will turn it over to Misty, who is online.
Thank
Misty?
you, and good morning, and thank you, commissioners, for having us. I'm going to keep it really brief. We have our upcoming Martin Luther King Jr. Day event, which is also a designated National Day of Service. That's happening on Monday, January 19th. And our AmeriCorps members that work with us 1 day a week to plan all of our signature events. We have 6 members that have been working really hard to put together a really amazing event. So I'm going to leave the rest of that to one of our AmeriCorps members, Sierra Shagnon, who is one of our Born House members, to give you more details.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Hi there, thank you for having me. As Misty said, I'm a year 27 AmeriCorps member living in the Bourne residence, and I'm placed with the Cape Cod Commission, where I serve by supporting our Cape Cod Outdoors project, developing an interactive inventory of recreation assets all over the Cape. And I'm here today to talk to you about our upcoming Martin Luther King Jr. Day of Service on Monday, January 19th. So nationwide, AmeriCorps programs honor Dr. King's legacy by treating the day as a day on rather than a day off, and bringing people together to serve their communities. So So this year, AmeriCorps Cape Cod is focusing on textile sustainability and clothing insecurity. We're partnering with the Family Pantry of Cape Cod to collect winter clothing and toiletries for local families ahead of the upcoming event. And then on Martin Luther King Day itself, we'll be at the 204 Cultural Arts Municipal Building in Harwich hosting a pop-up clothing shop where community members can bring gently used clothing items as well as take items for free themselves. And all the donated coats, hygiene items, and remaining clothing items will be donated to the Family Pantry. In addition, we'll be offering a free community luncheon and volunteer-run drop-in mending hours. And people can bring clothing items in need of repair, as well as they can sign up for, workshops run by 2 local organizations, Stitchology and Latinx in Action, who are running free educational workshops on sewing skills, upcycling, and clothing repairs. In Massachusetts alone, 230,000 tons of reusable textiles are thrown away each year. So this event aims to raise awareness, reduce waste, and get clothing to people who need it the most this winter. So if you're available, we'd love to invite you to clean out your closets or just check us out at the 204 on Monday. We'd love to have you, and thank you for giving me the time to share this with you.
You're welcome.
Well done.
Yeah, make sure we're noticed of that.
Yeah.
If you haven't noticed me already.
We did
do
get
it
noticed.
again.
We just got it a couple of days ago,
Oh,
and I
let's
noted
say
it
something.
because now my thrift shop is closed for a certain amount of time, and I still have
So-
things to give away. And, but I will ask Misty to send the sign-up calendar for dinners one more time, because I wanted to, the holidays came, and I do see the AmeriCorps people in the Outer Cape quite a bit, so I do want to get over there
Mm.
and help
Absolutely.
host a dinner. So, but I'm going to stop by. We have our own event in Wellfleet on Martin Luther King Day, so I will be there either before or after. But I won't be able to stay the whole day, but hopefully I'll have a bundle. I'd like to stay the whole day and get all my hemming done.
Yeah. So clean out your closet, Ron. Okay.
Anyway,
Misty, thank you.
It needs a
Great.
great work.
46 extra long.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, let's move
I,
on.
Is there anything else? Do they have anything else?
I don't know.
No? All set?
Mr.
They're all
Thank you.
set.
Gareth, thank you.
I have one other item. I just wanted to invite Jay Gardner up to
Yes.
introduce one of our new hires. We are glad to have.
I read about this. I saw that. Public.
So there's a adage in communication that you always end with optimism. And I have something very optimistic
Very
and
good.
positive to.
Oh, great.
I don't know if you have that CV or not. Jay Gardner, Director of Health and Environment. And I am pleased to announce, after a 4-month search with the administration and certainly Human Resource helped us as well, we were able to locate and recruit an individual with significant international experience, global experience in public health, Paul Randy Colsad. He is our new Deputy Director of Health and Environment. And to pick up on the conversation that you had earlier with the senators, it is very difficult to retain and recruit talent here. And in order to move and modernize this department, it requires leadership, right? Passionate leadership and experience. Well, we have found that. So I'd like to introduce Randy and let him talk to you a little bit about his experience. You see his CV. It's significant.
Yes.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. For the past 25 years, I've basically been leading the teams that design, award, and manage complex public health programs all around the world. Which basically means I deal with, obviously, public procurement. I've dealt with budget and budget monitoring and performance management, both of staff internal to the organization and contractors and grantees, and making sure that we're doing all the things that we say that we should do. And also dealing with stakeholders, like, little small districts in the countries in which I've worked. I call analogous to the towns that we have here on Barnstable County, the stakeholders that we work with, the various political stakeholders, the governing stakeholders, et cetera. And I've been struck by now day 8 on the job in my onboarding discussions with the team. Every issue that I have heard about has resonated as, oh my gosh, well, I dealt with this in other settings. It's fascinating to me, the linkages that I see between the public health work that I've done in multiple countries and the public health work that this department does. So I'm really looking forward to diving in to, improving the public health performance of the county and the things that we work on. And, I'm here for the long term. I live in Brewster. After, coming back last year after the dissolution of my agency,
Right, I can see that.
and plan to be here, forever, frankly. And so I'm really just looking
Forever is
forward.
a long time.
Well, hey, who knows? My wife and I have not decided. Yeah, quit at Creek Cemetery. I don't know,
Yeah.
but I really look forward to working with Jay and the rest of the team on the fascinating issues that we're facing here in the county.
Okay.
Very good. Commissioner Bergstrom.
Yeah, I'd just like to say, I know that the federal workforce has been devastated recently, and a lot of loss of talent. And if anything good comes out of it, it's the fact that now there are talented people available for us in the local community.
There are.
Doesn't mean I'm going to call up the president and thank him.
Thank you.
Chances are very slim on that. But it does give us an opportunity to get people like you to help us here in the local community. So thanks for coming aboard.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
Commissioner
I
Lyons.
was just gonna say, I mean, their loss is our gain, and it does look like you have a lot to offer. And I'd be more, I'm very interested, some little bit down the road, some more reflection on what you see and what you're getting yourself involved with. And we're a fascinating place too.
Yes.
And
yes.
but you had a house here, is that right? You had a house here, so now
Exactly. Yeah.
you've been able to stay. So that all works. That's a great thing for us, and we're glad that you're able to continue, your experience and put it to very good use because we need it.
Yeah.
So thank
Thanks.
you and welcome aboard.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
I read about you, I guess Facebook or something. I peruse Facebook. I try not to.
Yeah.
Once I say something, I'm in trouble.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, we do have an audience. I would to pick up on that. On January 9th, we put out our newsletter. And I
Right.
do want to, and Michael was very clear on
Yes.
making sure we have our community. The click rate was 50%. It was 42,000. 20,000 people clicked on that.
Oh, wow.
I know, Michael is redesigning that, but we have an audience and we want to even scale that even more. Just more importantly, Randy is going to be a tremendous asset to us as we grow this and look at strategically, how do we modernize this department and how do we actually implement what Vera and Michael are looking to do as far as how we move forward and implement those things and articulate to the community and to the staff internally, how do we build that? It's all about health, right? Each of the things you've talked about, it's all built on health.
Right.
It is.
It is
Well,
indeed.
thank you, Jay. Welcome aboard, and to be continued.
Absolutely.
Yes, we look forward to hearing from you again. Okay,
Appreciate it.
thank you.
Thanks.
The bewitching hour.
Yeah, the business that must come before the commissioner.
I have none.
I have
And hearing none.
Mr.
Michael,
Chair.
any last call?
Any last?
Nothing from me. Thank you very much.
We have a motion to adjourn.
I
move to adjourn.
Then I will second.
All right. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It carries unanimously. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Ian. Thank you.